Hey everyone, I'm Tom, and welcome to my 10 favorite reads of 2025 with just one caveat. I read all of Sunder this year, and it is very heavily represented in my top 10 because of that, and so I'm going to only talk about my favorite book from that series in this list. But don't worry, at the end of the video, I will give you my actual top 10 with no ifs, ands, or buts. But let's go ahead and jump in. And fun thing to start this video off in the number 10 spot is the first book that I finished in 2025, and that is Foster by Kara Clegan. I don't want to say too much about this novella. It's very short, I think about 85 pages or so. But for me, this is a story about love, compassion, and empathy, and how important that can be for somebody who doesn't have it. We follow a young girl throughout this story, and it really just shows like how important that can be, especially when you are young. It's beautifully written. The writing is something I think is really special, and this was really a year where shorter stuff worked for me very, very well. I've never really been much of a short story reader, but I read more short stories and novellas this year than I probably have at any other point, and Foster is a great example of what can be done in a short story. If you're interested in something on a little bit more of the literary side, this is a easy recommendation for me. Speaking of novellas or short stories, in the number 9 spot is The Body by Stephen King. This is obviously the basis for a very, very famous movie, Stand By Me. I watched that when I was very, very young. I didn't really remember a whole lot of it, but I wanted to read this year, and I'm so glad that I did. Obviously, it's in the top 10 this year, but really, for me, this is an adventure story. It's really, four boys going on an adventure to find a dead body. That's like the basic premise. But really what sticks out to me about this book is there are just some emotions that are brought up that Stephen King is able to express in a way that I would never be able to. And I think that's something that I have really always resonated with Stephen King is there are just these, I don't want to call them universal feelings, but there are just this plethora of feelings that I have felt throughout my life that Stephen King, that I would never be able to express in any meaningful way, right? But Stephen King is able to find the words and just say things exactly the way that I feel. And he's done it more than once, and he does it in this book there's like this period in childhood where I feel like you really start to think about the world in a different way, think about people in a different way. And he talks about that in the story, and it just really resonated with me. And it was like, wow, that is that emotion that I felt in words that like express it, and I would never have been able to come up with that on my own. And I think that just really shows how powerful of a writer he is. And this is just a book that is going to stay with me for a really, really long time. Next up in the number 8 spot is a book written by a friend of mine, and that is Mercy, Tears of the Fallen by Chance Dillon. You can find his YouTube channel here along with mine, and also we are in the same Discord together. That's all linked in the description. We can hang out and talk in there. Mercy, Tears of the Fallen is the first book that Chance has written, and this is the first in a planned 4-book series. And this is really a Malazan Dark Souls inspired story. And what I mean by that is it is a world you're just thrust into. You're not going to get all the details, all the information that you probably would want in a more traditional kind of fantasy. This is a very specific kind of story. And honestly, it is right on the line of what was too much and not enough for me, which is interesting because a lot of times I like my hand to be held when I'm reading some of these books. I like things to be kind of explained to me. I don't always want to be using 110% of my brain power to figure things out. And throughout this story, I think the line was just perfect where you got information, you were still figuring out the world, you were left with enough questions, and also the backdrop of just there being a good story. It's not just all about world building, right? The story is really well done, and the characters I got attached to much quicker than I thought I would. I have this interesting thing where I really love book ones, but also don't get super attached to characters very early on. It only takes about a book or 2 books really before I really start to get into characters. But that wasn't the case here. There was one character specifically. He's kind of the trope of the old grizzled veteran. It's a trope that I absolutely love, and he's back in the story. And I think, all of those things put together made a really compelling read. And I'm very excited to see what we get next from Chance. So Chance's book was the first in the series, and in the number 7 spot is the follow-up sequel to a trilogy, and that is While Darkness Gathers by another fellow booktuber, Philip Chase. This is one of the best sequels I think I've ever read when it comes to dealing with legacy characters. For me, so many series, when they move on, have trouble keeping the soul of their legacy characters, having anything for them to do, or just ignore them at all. They get handled so poorly so often. And Philip was able to balance new characters who you come to grow and love just as much as you do to those legacy characters, while treating those legacy characters the way I feel like they should have been treated. They still all felt how they should have felt, even though time has moved on, things have changed in this world. And I think that's a really difficult thing for many authors to do, and is one thing that I greatly appreciated about this story. Also, there's an adorable animal companion in here that was also just like a super nice touch. There was so much about this story that worked. It answered questions, and it's not that it finished the story, but it did finish the story from the original trilogy. The trilogy is a complete thing in of itself, but this is like that cherry on top of the sundae, right? Where you get just that little bit more that you didn't really know that you wanted, but it's really great that you got it in the end. Just sitting right outside of the top 5 in 6th place is Fugitive Prince by Janie Wertz. This is book 4 in her epic Wars of Light and Shadow series, and this is a series that I absolutely adore. It is unlike anything else I've ever read. You want to talk about world building, this has it. You want to talk about prose unlike anything else, this series has it. You want to talk about characters who you will definitely become very attached to, this series has it, and it's just unlike anything else I have ever read, and it's something that I'm going to continue to read. This is an 11-book series, so I definitely have a long way to go with this, but I'm very much looking forward to it. For this book specifically, there are some things that are explored in magic that are such a different kind of idea from anything I've ever read that is always going to make this series so unique. I wish I could say what it was, but it feels like a spoiler to say it, but there is just some of the coolest magic that nothing I had ever thought of that happens in this book that puts it on this list on its own, just that one moment itself. But then you start to talk about the rich world, the characters, and all of that, and it just gets even better from there. Now, this is a really cool feat. I think for the 2nd year in a row, Brian Lee Durfee has my favorite fantasy book of the year. 2024, it was The Forgetting Moon, and in 2025, it is the follow-up to that, The Blackest Heart. This is book 2 in his 5 War Injures trilogy, and so obviously this is a fantastic trilogy. It got my favorite fantasy book 2 years in a row. And the thing that I will always remember about The Blackest Heart is the battle that happens towards the end of this book. It is one of the most unique battle scenes I have ever read in my entire life. It's vicious, it's dark, it's grim, it's hardcore in all of the right ways. And it just absolutely blew me away when I read it. Like I said, it's extremely unique. And it's something that I didn't know I wanted to see. But when it happened, it was just chef's kiss. It was absolutely brilliant. This is obviously a series, once again, great characters, great world building, and this is a really great series that pays homage to some of the classical fantasy tropes and everything, but is also very modern in a lot of different ways, where it subverts some of those tropes, and it really shows you what modern fantasy can be, especially in a little bit more of a grim, dark aspect to it. There are a lot of really beautiful writing scenes in here as well, so just so much of this book works, and that is why it is my favorite fantasy book of 2025. In the number 4 spot, we have I Who Have Never Known Men. This was a book that I saw Joanna Reeds talk about, and I'm so glad that I did, because this book was absolutely fantastic. Really unlike a lot of things that I had read before. The basic premise is we are following a young girl who is trapped in a cage with 39 other women. They are under constant surveillance and guard. They're allowed to talk, but they have everything that they possibly need, but they're trapped in the cell being watched by guards. The other 39 women in this room remember the outside world, remember life before being stuck in this cage, and our main character does not. She does not have those memories, so she's a little bit of an outcast inside of this very small, confined space, and really the story progresses from there. I don't want to ruin anything. I don't want to spoil anything. But to me, this is a story about perseverance, the human condition, loneliness, and just a bunch of different other things. I really enjoyed this one. This isn't going to be a story for everybody. My fiance just read this. She did not connect with it nearly as much as I did. And I think some of that does come down to, this isn't a book where you're going to get a lot of answers from. This is much more just like an exploration of those things that I mentioned earlier, with no real hard answers, which for some people is going to be, rather frustrating. Some people that's just fine with, like me. And for some people, I think that's going to be a really big deterrent factor. I could see some people maybe being slightly bored by some of the stuff that goes on in here. But for me, obviously, that is not the case. The lack of answers didn't really bother me. It was really just the journey we went on, and the exploration of self, and so many other things that just worked so well for me. I also really did enjoy the writing style here. It is a translated work, so I'd be curious on what it's actually like. I believe it's French originally, so I'm assuming that was a decently well done transition from French to English. But I am always curious when I do read a translated book, how much of that is brought across. But I found it to be very well done, very much enjoyed this book, and it is, like I said, not one that I would recommend to everybody, but I think it's at least like worth the sample to give it a try. It's also not a very long book, so it's not like it's a massive commitment like some of the other things that I've read this year, but this is definitely one that I'm very glad that I read. So now it is time to crack into the top 3, and all 3 of these books are books that got 5 stars for me. So every book I've mentioned so far was actually only a 4-star, but here we are at the 5-star, with the 3rd place book being Howling Dark by Christopher Rocchio. I have my nice 1-of-1 custom cover signed by Christopher Rocchio. Very lucky to have that. But I mentioned earlier that Sun Eater was very highly, represented in my top 10. I also gave Shadows Upon Time a 5-star. So, just to give you that little bit of a preview. But Howling Dark, the 2nd book in the Sun Eater series, is still my favorite. There are just some scenes that happen very late into this book, towards the very, very end, that I think are all-time scenes. They are just brilliant. I think they changed how I thought about the series. It changed how I thought the series was going to go, and explored ideas in just such a fascinating way with fascinating characters that just gave me chills. Honestly, when I was reading it, it's stuff that I go back to over and over again. It just absolutely blew my mind. It went in ways and directions that I didn't think were possible. It subverted tropes that I didn't think it was going to be able to do. I think there's just so many things about this book that it did so much of it so well. And the series, the fact that it can live up to, I know this is the second book and it's my favorite, but the rest of the series also just kind of lives up to that for me. Especially it transforms after the first book. And, I hate to be the guy who's like, you got to at least read book two. But you got to at least read book two, I think, if you want to have a better understanding of what Sun Eater is, what it can be, and what it becomes. And I think that The Howling Dark really is the epitome of that. And it's definitely a book that is going to stick with me for a very, very long time. My penultimate book on my 2025 list is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kilwer. I have talked a lot about this book throughout this year. I have gotten a lot of people to read this book who have also really, really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved my time with this book. This is a psychological horror thriller mystery. This is one of the only books I've ever read that actually scared me. And I think that's a huge praise in of itself. It's a super simple premise, which is also makes it very exciting for me. Makes me very excited for the future things that Marcus Kilwer is going to write. But the basic premise of this story is a new couple moves into a home, and a family comes and knocks on the door and says, this is my childhood home. This is where I grew up. Would you mind if I showed my family around? And the story evolves from there. And it's one of those horror thrillers where every coincidence, everything that happens where you're like, I would do this. It answers all of those questions. It does those things so well. It keeps you on your edge of the seat. I read this book super fast. I think I maybe read this in like 2.5 days. So I flew through this. There is a movie coming too, if that's something that interests you. And there was just so much about this that I absolutely loved. And this is a book that I do recommend to everybody. And one of the things I love about this is I think this is a book, especially with the ending, that you're going to be like me. You're going to love this book, or you're going to get to that ending and be super frustrated. And normally that's not something I would recommend, but I think the conversations and the thoughts that this book makes you have when you read it absolutely makes it worth that. And I love hearing just as much from people who love this book as ones who the ending did not work for. And I think that just makes it a very special reading experience, and it makes it so much fun to talk about after the fact. So that leaves us with one book left, and that is my favorite book of 2025, which is Demon Copperhead. And Demon Copperhead is a difficult book for, a multitude of reasons, right? The subject matter that it's covering is not really something I would say is fun to experience. This is a book about poverty, addiction, rural Appalachia, and just some of the struggles that region of the country has had, right? And those struggles are not really like the most fun thing to read about. But I absolutely love this book. I think the way the story is told is beautiful. The writing, once again, is beautiful. The characters, you become so attached to the characters in here that you just feel for them so strongly, like they're real people. Like this is somebody that you know, that you want the best for, and you're seeing things happen in their life that just like give you pain. It's like if something really as bad has happened to a family member of yours, and you just feel so bad that you wish you could do something and you just can't. Those are the kinds of feelings that this book gives. I think this is one of the books that I would give to somebody. There's 3 books. I say this, that if I wanted to make somebody or if I wanted to give somebody a certain set of feelings for them to understand people who are a little bit different than them, I would give them this book. I would give them To Kill a Mockingbird, and I would give them The Jungle. Each one of those kind of dissects a different social issue that was happening at the time. So The Jungle is immigration in early America. To Kill a Mockingbird is racism, and this is obviously the opioid epidemic, really, and some other systematic issues that happened in rural, poor regions of America. And I think, it's very well done. Like I said, it can be a very difficult read. This isn't the kind of book that I would say if you're not feeling mentally well or anything that you should read, because this can get really down in the dumps and just shows you kind of over and over again how easy it is for these bad things to happen and all of that. But I absolutely love this book. It's one of the most powerful books, if that makes sense, that I've probably ever read. And this is absolutely one that I would recommend to anybody. Not necessarily because I think you're going to have like the most fun with it. This is not a fun book per se, but I think it's a really powerful book. One that I love, that the message is just incredible. And there's just so many things about this that I loved. And that's why I got the 5-star. It's why it is my favorite book of 2025. Now, I promised you I'd give you the unfiltered list. So just really quick, I'll give you like the top 15 because I've got it here. my favorite book, and this is, including a bunch of stuff from Sun Eater, kind of all stacked up. So it is still Demon Copperhead. It is still We Used to Live Here. It is still Howling Dark in third place. Fourth place then becomes Shadows Upon Time. Fifth place becomes Demon in White. Sixth place becomes Kingdoms of Death. Seventh place becomes Disquiet Gods. So you can see why I didn't just want to talk about a bunch of Sun Eater. I could just make a Sun Eater video. In eighth place is I Who Have Never Known Men. Ninth is The Blackest Heart. 10th is The Fugitive Prince. 11, While Darkness Gathers. 12, Mercy Tears of the Fallen. 13th, The Body. 14th, Foster. And then 15th, another Stephen King entry with Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. So that is the unfiltered, no cut anything top 15. But that is my list. 2025 was a fantastic reading year for me. I read a lot of really great stuff. So many things that I loved, a series that I loved, books that I loved, all of that fun stuff. But I would love to hear what you read in 2025, what your favorite read is. What's your least favorite read as well? I'd love to hear the contrast there for you guys. You can talk to me down below in the comments, or as always, you can come and hang out on the Discord that I'm in that is linked in the description. I also post some videos I take of outer space in there if that interests you at all. But that is going to be all for me. I hope 2025 was great for you. And remember, read what you want when you want.